My name is Oliver Thompson. I'm 17, a junior at Westbrook High in Denver. I'm just a regular kid. No special talents, no dreams of being a star athlete or anything like that. I prefer to stay out of trouble and coast through school, head down, getting through the day. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that day. The day I thought I was going to die. It started out normal enough. I was sitting in history class, staring blankly at the chalkboard, while Mr. Dalton rambled on about some Civil War battle. My mind was elsewhere, thinking about lunch, thinking about texting Jess, anything but history. Then, out of nowhere, the intercom crackled to life. Students and staff, this is an emergency lockdown. I repeat, we are now in emergency lockdown. Please follow all procedures. The air in the room shifted immediately. The casual boredom was replaced by a wave of fear. Mr. Dalton's face turned pale as he rushed to lock the door and pull down the shades. The panic in his eyes mirrored what we were all feeling. You could have heard a pin drop as everyone instinctively huddled together. I found myself pressed between two desks, my knees drawn up to my chest. My heart was pounding, and I could hear whispers around me. Kids asking what was going on, some mentioning a bomb threat. As the minutes ticked by, the tension became unbearable. I looked around the room, my eyes scanning the desks, and that's when I noticed it. A backpack stuffed under a desk in the back of the classroom. But it didn't belong to anyone. I knew all the kids in my class. There was no way that bag belonged to anyone here. I nudged my friend Max beside me and nodded toward the backpack. That yours? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. Max shook his head, looking just as confused as I was. I glanced at the others, but no one seemed to notice it, or at least, they didn't want to acknowledge it. I couldn't take my eyes off that bag. Something about it just felt wrong. The hours dragged on. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of a chair or a stifled cough. And then, suddenly, it happened. A loud bang echoed through the halls. We all screamed, the sound ripping through our throats before we even had time to think. I felt my heart leap into my throat. It wasn't the bomb, though. That much we knew. The walls were still intact, but the door burst open, and the SWAT team stormed in. The sight of them, guns drawn, shouting commands, was almost more terrifying than the lockdown itself. One of the officers noticed the backpack immediately. They acted fast, securing the room, ushering us out. We were rushed into the hall while they swarmed around the bag. I overheard one of the cops talking into his radio. "Bomb inside," he said. "It's armed." My stomach dropped. That bag, the one sitting in our room for God knows how long, wasn't just some forgotten book bag. It had a bomb in it. We had been sitting next to it for hours, and we didn't even know. I felt sick, the bile rising in my throat as we were led into the gymnasium with the other students. The hours after were a blur. Cops, teachers, parents, all in chaos. Eventually, we found out that the bomb had been defused just in time. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt lucky to be alive, but all I felt was dread. They never found out who planted it. That was the worst part. The school went back to normal eventually, classes resumed, and the lockdown was just another story to tell. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone in that room had something to do with it. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that whoever brought that bag might have been sitting right next to me, pretending to be just as scared as the rest of us. I started looking at everyone differently. Max, the quiet girl who sat by the window, even Mr. Dalton. I still have nightmares about that day. I see the backpack in my dreams, the sound of the bang ringing in my ears, the screams of my classmates echoing through the halls. I wake up sweating, my heart racing, just like it was that day. I don't think I'll ever feel safe again. Not really. I guess that's what scares me the most. Not knowing. Not knowing who did it, or why. Not knowing if they're still out there, waiting, planning something worse. Every time, I walk into that school. I wonder if today will be the day they try again. I wonder if we'll be so lucky next time. And every time I see a backpack sitting in an empty classroom, my blood runs cold. My name is David. I'm 17 years old, and I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm just an ordinary high school student going through the motions every day. Classes, homework, hanging out with friends. But there was one day that changed everything. A day that left me shaken in ways I never imagined. It started off as just another Monday. We were in the middle of a routine lockdown drill. Our school did these drills a few times a year, and by now, most of us had grown numb to them. You know the drill. The teacher locks the door, turns off the lights, and we all sit quietly in the corner of the classroom, pretending it's real. That day, though, something felt off. As we huddled in the corner, waiting for the drill to end, I happened to glance out the small window in the classroom door. That's when I saw him. A figure standing in the hallway, wearing a black mask. At first, I thought it was part of the drill, like maybe they were trying to make it more realistic. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The figure wasn't just standing there. He was staring directly into our classroom, not moving, just watching us. It felt like his eyes were locked onto mine, even through the mask. I wanted to say something, to warn the others, but my throat tightened up, and I couldn't get the words out. He just stood there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the sweat forming on my palms. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. I blinked, thinking maybe I had imagined it, but I knew what I saw. That was no drill. A few minutes later, the lockdown announcement echoed through the PA system again, but this time it wasn't the drill. This was the real thing. The voice on the intercom sounded different, more urgent, and I could hear the tension in every word. Attention, students and staff. This is not a drill. We are now in lockdown. Please remain in your classrooms, stay quiet, and follow lockdown procedures. Panic started to set in as I realized what was happening. The figure I had seen wasn't just some part of the exercise. He was inside the building. An intruder had somehow bypassed our security and was now roaming the hallways. The silence in the classroom was deafening. Everyone was too scared to move, too scared to even breathe. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. I couldn't stop thinking about that masked figure, about how he had just stood there, watching us. I felt like he knew we were in that room, like he was waiting for the right moment to strike. I checked my phone, hoping for some kind of update, but there was nothing. Just the ticking of the clock and the faint sounds of footsteps echoing through the hallway. Every creak of the floor, every distant noise made me jump. I kept imagining him bursting through the door, his cold eyes fixed on me. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Each second felt like an hour. The fear was almost unbearable. My thoughts kept spiraling back to that masked figure, standing so still, so unnervingly calm. Why hadn't he tried to break in? What was he waiting for? After what felt like hours, we heard the sound of police sirens blaring outside. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The police were here, but that didn't mean we were safe yet. We all stayed huddled together as the minutes dragged by, waiting for some kind of sign that it was over. Finally, the door to our classroom swung open, and a police officer stepped inside, telling us it was safe to leave. I could see the relief on everyone's faces, but for me, it wasn't over. I couldn't shake the image of that masked figure from my mind. As we filed out of the classroom, we were told that the intruder had been caught. They found him hiding in a bathroom stall, armed and waiting to attack. The thought made my skin crawl. He had been planning something horrible, and we were all just a few steps away from disaster. Even now, weeks later, I can't stop thinking about it. I keep replaying that moment in my head, trying to figure out why he was there, what he wanted. And the most terrifying thought of all, is that maybe he had been watching us for longer than we knew. Maybe he had been planning this for days, weeks, or even months, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The thought that we were all being watched, that we were so close to something unspeakable, still haunts me. I don't think I'll ever feel truly safe at school again. My name is Liam. I'm 16 years old, and I live in Orlando, Florida. It was a regular Thursday, and I was in the middle of gym class at my high school. The day had been completely normal, boring even, until that siren blared through the school. The piercing sound sent a chill down my spine. It was the lockdown alarm, something we had practiced in drills, but this time, it felt different. This time, it was real. Our gym coach, Mr. Daniels, immediately shouted for everyone to get into the locker rooms. The other coaches helped herd us inside, slamming the heavy doors shut behind us. They pushed the benches and anything else they could find against the doors, trying to barricade them as best as possible. The room was filled with nervous energy, people whispering, trying to stay calm, but you could hear the fear in every shaky breath. I crouched down in the corner with my friend Alex. We didn't talk, we just exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Everyone's phones were on silent, but I felt mine buzz in my pocket. At first, I thought it was a news alert about the lockdown, but when I checked the screen, my blood ran cold. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. It simply said, "Don't move. He's coming for you." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My hands started to shake as I showed the message to Alex. His eyes widened in fear as he read it, and he quickly looked around the room as if expecting someone to appear out of the shadows. "Who sent that?" he whispered, but I had no answers. I didn't recognize the number, and I had no idea who he was or why someone would send me such a message. I wanted to think it was a sick joke, but something told me it wasn't. Then we heard it, gunshots, loud and terrifying, echoing from a hallway just outside the locker room. The sound made everyone in the room freeze, and the reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. The gunshots were close, too close. Whoever was out there, they weren't far away. I held my breath, trying to stay as silent as possible, praying that the gunman wouldn't come our way. The silence in the locker room was deafening, everyone too scared to even whisper. The only sound was the occasional muffled sob or someone shifting their weight, trying to get more comfortable on the cold, hard floor. Minutes felt like hours as we waited, listening to the chaos unfolding outside. I kept my eyes glued to the door, half expecting it to burst open at any second. My mind raced, replaying that text message over and over again, trying to make sense of it. How did this person know me? How did they get my number? Why was I being targeted? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we heard the police storming the building. Their voices echoed through the halls as they cleared each room, moving closer and closer to us. When they finally reached the locker room, the relief was overwhelming. The doors were opened, and we were escorted out in small groups. The police had apprehended the gunman, they told us, and it was safe to leave. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me. Even as I walked out of the building, surrounded by other students and police officers, that text message kept replaying in my mind. Later that day, after the police had taken our statements and I was finally home, I tried to trace the number that had sent me the message. I thought maybe it was just a mistake, a wrong number, or a prank. But when the police ran it through their system, they found nothing. No trace of who it belonged to or where it came from. It was like the number didn't exist. To this day, I have no idea how the gunman knew my number or why he seemed to be coming for me specifically. The thought haunts me, keeping me up at night, wondering if it was just a random coincidence or something more sinister. I've tried to move on, to forget about that terrifying day, but every time my phone buzzes, I can't help but feel a wave of panic. fearing that another message might come through, telling me he's still out there, watching, waiting.